Today on Capital Ideas Life, the largest underground circle line.
We want to finish the large circle line by the end of 2022.
Miles more.
We also keep on building roads. We plan to build another 300 kilometers of roads during the next 5 years.
Destination Moscow.
I think we've been developing our own know-how.
Hello, I'm John Harrison. Today we're going to begin our program right here at the Moscow International Business Center called Moscow City. Now this has become a kind of symbol of large-scale, high-tech international design and construction. But Moscow itself has changed almost unrecognizably over the last few years. This is how it was in 2011. Today's 2018, and Moscow's #1 in the world in terms of construction of roads and metro. I talked about this with the director of one of Moscow's largest construction companies. The Mosin Project holding has developed incredibly over the last few years. Now, what's the most important thing that's happened over the last year?
Today, Mosin Project is a multifaceted, full-cycle construction company. It grew out of the namesake Engineering Institute, which was established in 1958. It has always been an important institution responsible for designing Moscow's transportation infrastructure facilities, including landmarks such as the Third Ring Road, Olympic facilities, the Ostankino Tower, etc. So when it was decided to take the existing institute, with all its traditions and experience with developing the infrastructure of such a huge metropolis as Moscow, and then reorganize it as a holding company specializing in constructing subway infrastructure facilities, this was the right decision. It was the only way to quickly take on the construction efforts and start preparing subway station sites for building engineering facilities and infrastructure.
Please tell us about the key projects that you've been involved in over the last few years.
In recent years, our most significant civil construction projects were the reconstruction of Luzhniki Stadium for the World Cup, Zaryadye Park, and Zaryadye Concert Hall. But our focus still remains on constructing Moscow metro facilities.
That's really interesting. I didn't know you constructed so many of these key projects. And how did you build them?
Those projects have very tight schedules, and both their design and construction work need to be performed in parallel. But if we take Luzhniki, for example, it's a common opinion of football fans, FIFA experts, and sports professionals that the company was able to create a state-of-the-art stadium and fit all the necessary facilities into the existing framework. This allowed preserving the stadium's historical appearance, which is well known and loved by both Muscovites and guests of the city, while at the same time building a stadium suitable for such a large-scale sporting event as the World Cup. The Zaryadye Park project is no less unique in its importance than the Luzhniki reconstruction project, because it's an architectural complex in the historical part of Moscow that was completed in slightly more than 2 years and involved parallel design and construction work. The result is a park with a large landscape that reflects the diversity of Russia's nature.
Yeah, I was in the Zaradye concert hall and I got a lot of foreign artist friends and they all really value the acoustics in that hall. How did you attain that effect?
For the initial design stage, we invited world-class specialists from Nagata Acoustics. The internationally acclaimed acoustics expert, Mr. Toyota, participated in this project, and Mr. Gergiev, who was involved in the development of the terms of reference and construction supervision. First, we prepared the terms of reference. We visited similar projects completed during recent years. We visited the state-of-the-art projects recently finished for the Paris and Hamburg Philharmonics. We analyzed existing best practices and the experience gained by our colleagues during these projects, and we created a 1 to 10 model to check the acoustics of the planned building. We put mannequins into seats, recreated the atmosphere of the future concert hall by adding ozone, and tested all acoustics parameters. The second important moment is the configuration of the auditorium itself. It's a transformer. In a matter of just 30 to 40 minutes, you can turn it into a classic parterre, or make the floor completely even and use the auditorium as an exhibition hall, or, I don't know, a ballroom. It extends the building's capabilities and allows it to be used for all kinds of events. And when selecting equipment for our new project, we've gone to many concert halls throughout Europe that have similar equipment installed. We visited the Louis Vuitton Foundation in the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, and we went to the University of Lausanne to see how their equipment works. So by using the experience gained by our colleagues during their previous projects, by those world-class experts, and by repeatedly consulting with them, we were able to create this amazing concert hall. And it was very nice to hear words of recognition from many professionals in our sphere. And both Moscow's locals and visitors alike seem to enjoy the building, which is also nice to hear.
Can we talk about the transportation projects, please? I hear that Moscow's right now #1 in the world, and as far as the speed goes, the construction of metro and roads.
Mosin Project has been constructing subway stations since 2011. At first, we were involved in designing metro stations and preparing construction sites. Today, the company's track record includes 36 subway stations and 75 kilometers of tunnels. This year was especially productive. This year, we've built and commissioned 15 metro stations, and we plan to launch another 2 by the end of the year. That's a total of 17 stations. It's an absolute record throughout the history of Russian subway construction projects that so many stations were commissioned within a single year. And in addition to that, we've also commissioned 2 railway depots, Likhabory and Solntsevo. Our largest project is the large circle line. As of now, it includes 5 stations. We plan to complete it by the end of 2023. And to complete the large circle line, we need to build 26 more stations. Then we'll have a circle line that will make passenger transportation in Moscow far more efficient.
Moscow is such a huge place, isn't it? I hear that major transportation terminals are being built right now. Why is it necessary and how are you building them?
We are also creating passenger interchange facilities, which will significantly increase the availability of passenger transport in Moscow. Here's an example. By the end of this year, we're going to commission the Khovrina transportation hub. Essentially, it's a large international bus station. Buses from all different directions, including the West, will arrive here. And it will include the Khovrina metro station. So passengers will be able to transfer from a bus to a subway train and go straight from there to the very center of Moscow. A large transportation hub is also planned at the Nizhegorodsky station. It's at Ryazansky Avenue. In fact, it will be one of the largest transit hubs in all of Europe. Currently, the railway contractor is finishing the construction of the Karacharova railway station. It will connect to the Nizhegorodsky metro station, and above ground, we will also have the Moscow Central Circle. Essentially, it will be the largest interchange hub where passengers will be able to switch over from one means of transportation to another.
So do you work with any foreign companies at the moment? And if you do, in what form does your cooperation take?
We cooperate with foreign companies. First of all, it's the French company Suez. We went to France to learn from their experience with soil movement and processing waste soil from tunnel boring machines. They're also working on the so-called Greater Paris project. We visited several subway stations currently under construction to learn from their experience. We also invited experts from Suez for consultations on our projects in Moscow. The Chinese company CRCC is also involved in the construction of new Moscow metro stations. They're currently working on 3 stations and 3 associated railway sections on the large Circle line. When comparing our work to that of our Chinese colleagues and our colleagues from Paris, I can proudly say that we have top-notch professionals as well as excellent equipment and machinery. And thanks to that, we're able to construct subway stations in such a short period of time.
The Belomorskaya station on the Zamoskvoretskaya metro line is scheduled to be opened at the end of the year. It was built with the subway line between the river terminal and Khovrina stations remaining in operation by boring new tunnels and literally cutting into the existing station facilities. By the end of the year, we plan to launch a section of the Nekrasovskaya metro line between the Nekrasova and Kosina stations. We already had a pilot launch back in August. By the end of the year, we also plan to open the Savyolovsky station on the large Circle line, and in the summer, the interchange hub will start operating here. Actually, we have multiple large transit hubs under construction right now. The Moscow Metro is being built in a tremendous pace. In recent years, residents in almost 30 city districts welcome new stations within walking distance of their homes. In the coming years, 24 more stations are set to open in Moscow. Now, there was a time when Moscow city limits were right here in the Garden Ring, but the city grew, and now it occupies a huge territory. 12 million people live here now. 6 years ago, the city grew again. Why and how? Vladimir Fyodorovich, 6 years ago, the territory of Moscow suddenly grew by 1.5 times. I've never seen anything like this anywhere in the world. Now, why is this happening?
First of all, for complex construction projects that are difficult to build in older areas, for example, large logistics centers, there was a plan to move federal agencies out to new locations. But considering that the economic conditions have changed, well, perhaps now it's not the right time for that, for spending so much money on new buildings for federal agencies. But still, finding new areas for development is very important for Moscow.
Clearly new business areas have developed, and how's the world reacted to this, particularly the business community?
This is a great opportunity for investors because we have free areas, many of them about 40,000 hectares in total, and they can launch different construction projects there, both residential and non-residential. This is a great opportunity for investing in new construction projects. And considering how quickly the infrastructure of new Moscow is being developed, this is another point in favor of investing in such projects.
And which aspect of the economy of New Moscow right now is the readiest, the ripest for foreign investment?
New districts require new enterprises, new IT companies, new IT technologies, and new digital technologies. We just need to adjust the logistics. Today, multi-purpose shopping facilities are being built in new areas, as well as community infrastructure facilities, including schools, kindergartens, and medical centers. But we don't have enough IT or electronics companies, so we believe that it's a great opportunity for investors.
For which countries are investors right now from who are working with the department?
A French company is planning to begin a large construction project, but at the moment, it's still at the concept stage. We've already chosen a land plot, and they have considered it and developed a concept, but they still have a long way to go. And we have this Czech company. They're currently in the active construction phase. Their project is called the Kiev Highway, 4 kilometers away from the Moscow Ring Road. They've already developed about 200,000 square meters. Now they're designing the second stage. By the way, their building currently houses 3 large IT companies, and 97% of the spaces there are already occupied by tenants. So that Czech company continues to develop its project and is making preparations to start the construction for the second stage.
They say that New Moscow is developing really quickly. Is that really true? But is this this speed development really necessary?
When we developed the master plan, we created a model of harmonious development and an integrated infrastructure for real estate properties. And individual projects, such as infrastructure facilities, roads, utility systems, schools, kindergartens, clinics, everything is being built according to this model. For a city to be able to grow and develop sustainably, infrastructure development has to outpace real estate construction projects. In this way, capitalization is higher and people who buy new properties are receiving more value for their money.
So what is the competitive advantage of the territories of New Moscow for foreign investors?
The most crucial thing is infrastructure. Over the past 6 years, more than 170 kilometers of highways were built, the metro network expanded considerably, and more than 60 new social infrastructure facilities were opened. All that created over 100,000 new jobs through new districts. And we continue building roads. During the next 5 years, we are going to build almost 300 kilometers of roads and highways. We keep building new overhead crossings, as well as new railway tracts on the Kursk and Kiev routes. All this is improving accessibility and transport infrastructure, and makes it easier for people to get to work or any other place in the city that they want to go to. It also makes it easier to transport cargo, for example, to transport raw materials to processing facilities, or to distribute finished goods from manufacturing facilities. All this attracts investors. We're creating a fully self-reliant city, an urban environment where young people can comfortably live and work.
I gather that in the early stage of development of New Moscow, you looked towards the greater Paris as a kind of example. But now, apparently, Maurice Leroy has said that they might want to use the experience of Moscow.
It took them a long time to develop the larger Paris project. They've got a master plan already, but they haven't moved along any further up to now. About 4 years ago, we were in the same boat. We were also developing a master plan, an area development plan, a transportation infrastructure plan, a utility infrastructure plan, and we had reached a similar stage of development, preparing design documentation for a new Moscow. But then everything changed. They remained at the stage of finalizing urban planning documentation and went ahead and started developing new areas. This is why Maurice Leroy says there is a lot to learn from the New Moscow project, because the New Moscow is being developed comprehensively. We simultaneously build roads, utility systems, social, cultural, and sporting facilities, and what is most important, all of that creates jobs. That is why Maurice Leroy pays so much attention to the dynamics of developing new territories.
Today, it is not Moscow who is following others' examples, but rather other capitals are trying to adopt Moscow's best practices in architecture and urban planning.
I believe that we are accumulating our own kind of know-how. We don't have any models to follow. We may borrow individual elements or share experience, but there is no perfect model for Moscow. The new Moscow is simply emerging here and now the way it should be. Moscow, I think, one of its traditional trademarks has been its high level of diversity. It encompasses so many different things. Those who visited Moscow 5 years ago and are coming back today can clearly see that Moscow has changed a lot, that now it has more parks and public spaces. Of course, renovation is the right approach for the entire city, because we don't need to build new districts. We simply need to help developers and residents rebuild existing ones.
70% of Moscow's territory is occupied by industrial parks. The city's authorities are focused on tackling the issue of Moscow's so-called Rust Belt. The primary goal here is to breathe new life into those areas that have lost their initial purpose.
We conducted a comprehensive analysis. The main problem here was that developers were looking at those areas purely as developers would, and heritage experts were looking at them only from the standpoint of cultural and historical heritage. We have created a study that analyzes those areas across 3 separate dimensions: urban planning, architecture, and historical and cultural heritage. We combined them into a single matrix to show how many types of architecture there are here, and how one can use them. Basically, what we created, if not a comprehensive handbook, is at least a very practical study.
Moscow is truly changing right before our eyes. Not only Muscovites say that, but also foreigners who do business here.
Moscow has developed a lot in urban planning last few years. I've been living here 17 years. As a foreigner and who is a person in the business, I can see professionally the development and the progress in Moscow. And the city became more livable for habitants. Parks and streets, walking zones. And anyway, Moscow is has first place in the world for green area per square meter per person. Is amazing.
The most important public space today is the Moscow River. Reconstructing embankments and creating new comfortable pedestrian and bicycle routes is making Moscow's main waterway attractive again, both to the city's residents and visitors. Well, another side of Moscow has been opened up for you today, construction side of the city. I hope it's been interesting for you. What a move. I'm John Harrison. See you again soon. Bye-bye.